Hello Infiniteers! Today I'm going to show you how to hook up the logic for my Toy Box baseball game. And there's a lot to cover, so let's jump right in it. My initial thought had been to do all of the logic for the game itself in one video. And as I started recording this, it was taking over an hour and we were only about 2/3 of the way through the logic. So I'm going to divide this video up into 2 or maybe 3 videos. And I've already done some preliminary work ahead of time to save time, but don't panic. I know there are a lot of Creativitoys here, and as I said, this is going to take a few episodes to do, but this is not difficult. It's just going to take time for you to hook it all up, and I'm going to explain everything as we go, and I'm not going to skip anything, so I'll show you everything that you need to do. And by the way, I've also got logic diagrams on my blog to help you out, so you may want to reference those as we go along. I'll post the link to those diagrams in the video description. If you don't normally use these diagrams, you might want to do that this time, because this is probably the most complex game logic-wise that I've built. And again, it's not difficult, there's just a lot of logic to this. Alright, so let's start by reviewing the Creativitoys that you're going to need. And you can kind of divide these up into several categories. And so we have the toys that are for game management. We've got some more toys over here for game management. We've got toys at the mound for doing the pitching, and that includes the falling object generator up there. We've got toys necessary for batting, and toys necessary for running the bases. Okay, and there's some toys for extras, so having the players celebrate, having cheering and stuff going on, and sound effects and things. So that's all of the toys that we need, and you can also see I've added this little nice parky type thing. These are all decorations out of the decorations drawer. Some plants out of the plants drawer. That little statue's out of the decorations drawer too. You don't really need those, but I did that and put my starting pad over here. But anyway, let's cover the Creativitoys you're going to need. So first of all, we have our challenge maker. We have a scoreboard and a logic gate. We have a time delayer. We have our sound effect generator, and this is out of the Gameplay Toys drawer. We have a logic gate, and most of these, of course, are in the Creativitoys drawer. We have an action enforcer. We have another logic gate, a randomizer, a repeater, a level starter. Over here I've placed a little picket fence to kind of separate this area. This is just out of the decorations drawer. And I've grouped these controls together to try to help you understand what they're for. And so these two controls are for the outs, and these little things are just under the decorations drawer. So for helping us with the number of outs, we have a logic gate and a counter. This is for managing the inning while you're in the inning. So we have 2 more counters and 2 time delayers. And this is for the end of the game. And we have a counter here for that keeps track of the number of innings. Around the perimeter of the soccer goal, we have these party cannons. These are out of the Gameplay Toys drawer. I've got 3 of them. And let's start at the mound. So we have a trigger. Again, that's out of the Creativitoys, and I've also got a trigger at each of the home plate and bases. I've got 2 logic gates here. We have our falling object generator and a locator. Let me pick up the falling object generator so you can see how this is positioned. It's positioned just like that. All right. And the locator is centered right underneath of it. So that's how you position the locator where it needs to be. This eventually is going to move below the terrain when you're all done. But the positioning of this locator is important. Alright, at home plate we have a trigger area. I've got a logic gate out here and another one on the other side. We have a radar marker which is connected to a locator, and notice which way the blue dot on the locator is facing. Actually, that doesn't really matter. And we got two more logic gates over here. We have a locator here. This one, the blue dot, does matter. This is facing toward home plate. This is player 1's start position. And we have a locator over here for player 2's start position. And notice which way the blue dot there is facing. It's facing toward the mound. At each base, we have a trigger, two logic gates, a locator, and a radar marker. And again, all of the radar markers here are connected to their associated locator with the new locator connection. I made that ahead of time to save a little time. So over at second base we have the same controls, two logic gates, a trigger, a locator, and a radar marker, and the same thing at third base. And of course we have our soccer goal that we placed down last time. So those are all the Creativitoys that you need for the game itself. Now I've already made a number of connections as well. So this logic gate here, on my logic diagrams, this is the logic gate that's labeled cheering. And I've connected this to all 21 of the stadium stands. And you do a new logic connection, basically, so that on output, we do loud cheering on each of the stands. So again, there's 21 logic connections I made there. The randomizer is also connected to all 21 stadium stands. We have 10 random trigger signals, and we have 21 stadium stands. So each of the random trigger signals is going to invoke 2 stadium stands. Random trigger signal number 10 is going to invoke 3 of them. And I tried to set it up to where the randomizer invokes stands on opposite sides. So this is random trigger 1, for example, and random trigger 1 also invokes this one. Random trigger 2, random trigger 2, random trigger 3, random trigger 3, so that you're kind of surrounded by the sound. All right, up here in the top, random trigger 4 connected to this curved one, and so on. So try to pick stands that are opposite sides as much as you can. When you connect these with the new logic connection on the randomizer, I'll show you how it's set up. So you're going to do, like, for example, random trigger 1. You're going to do soft cheering on the stands. Okay? So the randomizer is going to do soft cheering. It's just background noise when there's nothing going on. All right, and then I also set up all the properties on these ahead of time to save time. So on the repeater, that is set to a 1-second rate. On the challenge maker, properties are set up this way, and you can pause and look at all of these and copy what I've got. Challenge type is no vehicles or mounts. Scoreboard is set up this way. On the sound effect generator, make sure that you turn off the 3D sound at speaker or locator. The rest of those toys have no properties. Oh, this time delayer does. 2 seconds. All right, over here, this is the counter for the number of outs. So the target count on that is 3. Make sure you set all the rest of those properties like you see there. these two are keeping track of whether we're in the top of the inning or the bottom of the inning. So the first counter is set up like that. Second counter is set up like that. And then this counter keeps track of the number of innings. By default, I've got the target count set to 9 for 9 innings. If you want to play just 1 inning, set that to 1. If you want to play 3 innings, set it to 3, so on. So if you don't want to play a full 9 innings, you just want to play a little bit, you can just change that target count before you start the challenge, and you're good to go. All right, the soccer goal, scored object action is defeat. That'll remove the ball when it goes into it. All 4 of the radar markers are set up the same way. Again, we connected them to the locator that's with it. And under the properties, the beacon type is a yellow arrow, beacon location is locator, active is off. All 4 of those are set the same way. And I believe that is all of the properties for all of these things. All right, so let's start with some of the basic stuff today. This is the stuff that you would normally do when you set up a challenge. We'll start easy on this to kind of ease you into it. So we're going to begin with the scoreboard. So on the challenge maker, we're going to do a new logic connection on invites accepted. I want to reset the scoreboard. Okay? And we also don't want that displayed when the second player comes into the toy box. So on the level starter, we'll do a new logic connection on catalyze. We'll make sure we turn this off. Whoops, that's the wrong thing. The scoreboard's where it meant to go. New logic connection on catalyze. Remove the display. All right, on the challenge maker, new logic connection. When the game is started, we're going to come over to the scoreboard and activate it. No, not reset. Fortunately, we can edit this. Activate. There we go. And then on game ended, there's 2 things we need to do with the scoreboard. So we want to do a new logic connection first of all. When the game is ended, we want to deactivate the scoreboard. And we also want to remove it from the display. And since I can't make a second connection from game ended to the scoreboard, that's why we have this logic gate. So we'll input into that. And on the logic gate, new logic connection on output, we'll remove the display for the scoreboard. And the last thing we need on this, on the challenge maker, is a new score results connection to the scoreboard so that we can see the score at the end of the game. And that is it for the setup on the scoreboard. Now on the challenge maker, a new logic connection on invites accepted. We're going to come over to our cheering logic gate and input, and that'll have all of the stands start doing loud cheering for the start of the game. Also on the challenge maker, a new logic connection on invites accepted. We're going to turn on our repeater. And on the repeater, a new logic connection on repeat. We're going to invoke the randomizer. So every 1 second, this is going to go off, invoke the randomizer, which will cause 2 random stadium stands to do soft cheering. That's going to provide our background noise through the whole game. Okay. Now, next thing we want to do is we need to reset all of those counters. So on the challenge maker, a new logic connection on invites accepted. We need to come over to each of these and reset. So all 4 counters need to be reset. You can make the same connection for those other 2. The next thing I want to do is let's connect this up to our locators. So on the challenge maker, a new locator connection. We're going to connect up to this locator. This is going to be player 1's start position. Player 1 is going to bat first. And new logic connection, or new locator connection, sorry, on the challenge maker. We'll connect that to this locator. This will be player 2's starting position, facing the mound, because player 2 is going to defend first. And on the challenge maker, a new locator connection. I'm going to connect up to this locator that's sitting out on top of the start pad. That'll be our end location. So when the game is over, we're going to put the players back here. All right. And then on the level starter, we want to do a new logic connection on catalyze. I want to have this trigger area deactivated initially, which means the level of the challenge maker here needs to activate it at the start. So new logic connection when invites are accepted will activate that trigger area. All right, so that is everything on the first logic diagram for invites accepted. Okay, when the game is started, there's a few things we want to do. Want to play a few sounds. So we're going to do, first of all, a new logic connection. When the game is started, I want to play the coach whistle. So on the sound generator, under general category, scroll down to the coach whistle. And we want to give a little time for that to play, and that's why we have the time delayer here set to 2 seconds. So on the challenge maker, new logic connection when the game is started, we're going to invoke this time delayer. And on the time delayer, a new logic connection when the delay is completed. 2 seconds later, we're going to come to our sound effect generator, and under the vocal category, we have this sound called umpire play ball. There's a number of voiceovers for an umpire here, so we're going to take advantage of those. So when the game starts, the players are in the stadium, the coach whistle will sound, and the umpire will say play ball. That'll be at the start of the game. It's just a nice little touch. All right, and that's pretty much it for the challenge maker game started. There's one more connection we need to make, but I think we're going to do that next time when we get into the base running. Okay. Yeah. And we'll take care of the game ended stuff later as well. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is let's move on to pitching. So this is probably one of the easier parts of the logic here, so we're going to do that first. Now we've got 2 logic gates that I've placed here. So we're going to route the signal through both gates before it goes up to the falling object generator to drop the ball. The first logic gate ensures that only one ball is in play at a time. So we don't want the defender to just jump up and down on top of this thing and put 3 balls in and immediately get their 3 outs. Because believe me, some people will think of that. The second logic gate is for ensuring that the defender can't pitch until the batter is ready. And again, people will think of that too. And so that's the purpose of those 2 logic gates. So the first thing we want to do is come over to our challenge maker and set those up. So on the challenge maker, a new logic connection on invites accepted. We're going to come over to that first logic gate here, and we're going to open it. All right. And then we're going to close the other gate. So a new logic connection on invites accepted. We're going to close this gate. That puts those in the proper state initially. Okay. So when the player who's defending steps on this, or actually it doesn't matter if any player steps on this, we'll do a new logic connection on the trigger here on the mound. When stepped on by player any, we're going to come over to our first logic gate and attempt to input. And at the start of the game, this is in the open state, so no problem. Now this gate, new logic connection on output, will attempt to input into our second gate. This one is in the closed state initially, and this is only going to be open if a player is standing on home plate. So the batter has to be on home plate to indicate they're ready. So on the trigger for home plate, new logic connection, when stepped on by player any, we'll open this gate. And on this trigger, new logic connection when stepped off by player any, we'll close that gate. So this gate is only going to be open when a player is standing on home plate. So initially this is open. The player who's batting steps on home plate, that opens this gate. And then the defender can step on here and the signal will get through both gates, and we want it to go up to the falling object generator. So on this second gate, new logic connection on output, we'll come up to our falling object generator and generate the ESPN baseball. That will generate it at this locator, and I've already connected the falling object generator up to that with a new locator connection. Okay. Now we only want one ball in play at a time. So on the falling object generator, we want a new logic connection when generated. We're going to close each of these gates. So a new logic connection when generated, and we'll close the second gate. So even if the player is still standing on home plate, which they will be until they hit the ball, this will be in the closed state. Okay, so that takes care of that. And then the batter hits the ball, runs the bases, the defender tries to get the ball into here, and once the defender gets the ball into the soccer goal, the ball is now out of play, so we can reopen that first gate. So on the soccer goal, new logic connection, when a goal is scored by physics ball, we can come over here and reopen our first logic gate. Just the first gate. This gate is only opened and closed from the home plate, and we're only really just closing it as a precaution from the falling object generator. This only should be opened when a player is standing on home plate. So the soccer goal only connects up to this one to reopen it, and that's very important. Okay, so that takes care of pitching, and that's got all the checks and balances in place that you need. So there we go. How are we doing on time? Okay, so 24 seconds. Let's go ahead and do the hitting, and then we're going to save the base running and the game management for next time. All right, so hitting the ball. So what's going to happen, as you saw in the playthrough, is the ball drops, hits the slope, and rolls toward home plate. And I need a way to know that the player has hit the ball before we allow them to start running the bases, because we don't want the player just ignoring the ball and running toward home plate or toward first base. they have to put the ball into play. And so what's going to happen is the ball is going to enter the trigger area. And again, you can kind of see the dimensions of that trigger area by looking at the terrain seams here. But once the ball enters it, then the player can hit it, and then the ball leaves, then we can allow them to do the base running. So the first thing we need to know, or we need to do, is let the player know that it's okay to hit the ball, that the ball has in fact entered this trigger area. So we're going to play a sound effect for that. So on the trigger area, we're going to do a new logic connection when entered by a physics ball. We're going to come over to our sound effect generator, and we're going to play our coach whistle under the general category. That's going to be their cue that it's okay to hit the ball. So then the player hits the ball however they want to do that. And when the ball leaves the trigger area, that's what's going to initiate all the rest of the logic. Okay? So the first thing we're going to do is a new logic connection when exited by physics ball. First thing we'll do is turn on the radar marker over at first base. And again, that's already connected to this locator. And when we're all done, you'll want to move this locator on top of that trigger. But we're not going to do that right now. Makes things hard to select. The second thing we're going to do, new logic connection when exited by physics ball. We're going to come over to our logic gate for the cheering and input. So when the player hits the ball and it leaves that trigger area, the crowd goes nuts. And we're going to do one more thing, which I'll cover in a moment. But first, we only want to do this action one time. So if the ball leaves the trigger area and the defending player pushes that ball back through here, we don't want to do all this again. So we need to deactivate this trigger area. So on the trigger area, a new logic connection when exited by physics ball. We're going to come over to this logic gate and input. And on that logic gate, new logic connection on output, turn around to the trigger area and deactivate it. Okay? All right. And then once the ball goes into the soccer goal, then we can reactivate this. So on the soccer goal, a new logic connection. When a goal is scored by the physics ball, then we can go ahead and turn this back on. So it's ready for the next ball. And on the challenge maker, new logic connection. When the game is ended, we should probably make sure this trigger area is turned off. Just as a precaution. All right. Now the last thing this trigger area needs to do is initiate the base running. And I'm going to cover that next time. But just to finish hooking this up, I'm going to do a little preliminary explanation here. And I'll repeat this information next time just to make sure you don't miss it. And after this video airs, maybe some of you will have questions and I can address that in the next video. But the logic for running the bases, this is the part that I struggled with for a long time and why it took so long to get baseball to you. Because the base running logic needs to be the same for player 1 and player 2. And I had a ton of controls set in here initially, and I had to simplify this to make this easy enough to follow and be able to actually build it. So this logic gate here is the logic gate that is labeled on all of the logic diagrams as batter ID. So this logic gate is going to tell us which player is batting. If this logic gate is open, player 1 is batting. If this logic gate is closed, player 2 is batting. And so when the ball leaves this trigger area, we're going to pass it through this logic gate. And this is going to determine what happens at each of the bases, whether it's player 1 that scores or player 2 that scores. So this trigger area, new logic connection, this is the final connection we need to make on the trigger area. When exited by physics ball, we're going to attempt to input into this gate. And again, depending on whether this is opened or closed is going to determine what happens at the bases. Now initially player 1 is batting, so we want to make sure that gate is in the open state initially. So on the challenge maker, a new logic connection on, let's see, I think it's on started is what I did. We want to make sure this is open. Okay, and now that takes care of all the logic connections on the challenge maker started diagram. Excuse me. Okay, and that takes care of batting. It's really just a matter of detecting when the ball leaves this trigger area and enabling the player to start running the bases by passing that signal through here. And what happens after the signal leaves this logic gate is what happens, what determines who scores. And we're going to cover that next time. So next time we'll cover the base running logic. That will probably be the bulk of the video next time. And then we'll also cover the fielding of the ball, what happens when the defender gets the ball into the soccer goal, and the game management over here, which this actually goes very quickly. So that's what we're going to do next time. So that's it for this part of the logic. Thank you for watching and sticking with me through this episode. I know we have a little ways to go, but we'll finish this up next time. Let me remind you again before you go that I have logic diagrams on my blog that will really help you out. If you don't normally reference the diagrams, you may want to this time, because again, there's a lot of logic here. And once again, the link is in the video description. That's all for me today. Have a great day.